will now take the precedent for the Planning Local Review Body by roll call. Fellow members are present, Councillors Ali Callison and Jerry Convery. We have apologies from Councillor Mary Donnelly. Councillors Gladys Ferguson-Miller, Mark Horsham are present. We have apologies from Councillor Leslie MacDonald and Councillor McLaughlin is attending as a substitute. Councillors Richard Nelson, Norman Ray and Ali Salamati are present. We have apologies from Councillor Graham Scott and Councillor Devlin is attending as a substitute. Thank you, and I'll now pass you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you, Stuart. Just before we commence today's meeting, colleagues, as we're all aware, last week we lost our beloved Queen, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She truly was a remarkable Queen who touched so many people in our communities. If able, can I please ask you all to stand and observe a minute's silence to mark the death of Her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth II. Sorry, back to the day's business. Any declarations of interest? Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. I'll move this.
I'll second it.
Item 3, review of case in respect of planning application P22044, erection of 2 detached dwelling houses. Planning permission in principle lands 70 metres south-west of Ivy Cottage, Heads Highway, Glassford, Straven. The item before us today is a notice of review from Houghton Planning Limited on behalf of J&G Davidson Limited. The applicant is asking the PLRB to review an application for planning permission in principle for the erection of 2 detached dwelling houses at land 70 metres south-west of Ivy Cottage, Heads Highway, Glassford. The review has been requested due to the failure to give a decision on this application and therefore is a deemed refusal. The planning advisor will first describe the background to this request for a review to members. I'll ask James just to give us an update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, unlike the majority of reviews that are put before you, this review is for the failure to give a decision on the application and therefore there is no report of handling and decision from the planning officer. As part of the planning application process, the planning officer did intimate to the applicant that they would be refusing the application, which led to the applicant seeking this review before any decision was made. Whilst there is no report of handling for the application, the planning officer has provided a statement of observation that has been included in Appendix 5 of the agenda papers, with the applicant's further comments on these in Appendix 6. In terms of the application, it is for planning permission in principle for the erection of 2 detached dwelling houses on land 70 metres to the south-east of Ivy Cottage, Heads Highway, Glassford. The dwelling houses are not proposed in relation to any agricultural or other rural business. As the application is for planning permission in principle, the assessment is of the principle of the development only. Matters relating to design are therefore not part of the required assessment process. The application site is on land designated as Greenbelt within the local development plan. The application site is located within a rural area, but adjacent to existing houses. The application site is bounded by an existing farm access to the south and then a row of 4 new build houses. To the north, it is bounded by the garden and then property of an existing dwelling house as well as agricultural land. To the east of the site, there is further agricultural land, and to the west, there is a public road, and across this, there is an area of agricultural land with a further new dwelling house slightly southwest of the site. The application site is agricultural and is currently used for agricultural storage. In terms of consultations, there were 4 requested, with 3 having currently responded. West of Scotland Archaeological Service note that the application site is with an area of historic interest, but the application site comprises previously disturbed ground through agriculture, and therefore they do not consider any archaeological work to be of benefit in this instance. Environmental Services had no objections to the proposals, subject to standard conditions relating to residential waste control and controls relating to the control of dust during construction. Roads Development Management Team noted the rural nature of the site and that it is for planning permission in principle, so there are no details relating to the size of the houses or their parking requirements. As part of their response, they also requested that the application be deferred for the submission of further information relating to proposed passing places on the north and south approaches to the site on Heads Highway, vehicular and pedestrian visibility displays at the proposed access of the site, and a 2-metre footway along the frontage of both proposed dwelling houses. This information has not been submitted, although it is noted that road safety has not been raised as a concern within the Planning Officer's statement of observation. Roads Flood Risk Management have not yet responded to their consultation request. As noted in the agenda papers, the planning application received 1 letter of objection with the following concerns: the location of the site within the Greenbelt, the existing level of surrounding development, the houses may not be of an appropriate scale and design for the countryside, the impact on privacy and overlooking the dwelling houses may create, increase in light and noise pollution to the area, impact on drainage and infrastructure within the locale, impact on wildlife in the trees and hedges that adjoin the site, and increased traffic. In assessing this local review, the local review body are respectfully requested to consider the following relevant policies of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2, which are: Policy 4, Greenbelt and Rural Area. This policy advises that the purpose of the Greenbelt is to direct development to the most appropriate locations and support regeneration, protect and enhance the character, landscape setting and identity of the settlement, protect and provide access to open space. Policy 4 also advises that development in the Greenbelt will be strictly controlled and any proposals should accord with the appropriate uses set out in Scottish planning policy. Policy 4 goes on to advise that the Greenbelt functions primarily for agriculture, forestry, recreation and other uses appropriate to the countryside. Development which does not require to locate in the countryside will be expected to be accommodated within the settlements identified on the proposals map. Isolated and sporadic development will not be supported. Then policy GBRA 8, development of gap sites, which states that within the Greenbelt and rural area, proposals for new houses within clearly identifiable gap sites will be supported where all of the following criteria can be met. 1. The building group shall form a clearly identifiable nucleus with strong visual cohesion. The site shall be bounded on at least 2 sides by habitable houses or other buildings, excluding ancillary residential uses such as garages, that are currently or are capable of being brought back into use. The distance between the existing buildings shall be no more than that needed to form a maximum of 2 house plots of a size in keeping with the curtilage and frontage of the existing group. 2. The proposed house size to plot ratio shall be comparable to existing properties within the building group. 3. The proposed development shall not result in ribbon development or coalescence within another building group. 4. Exceptionally, within the rural area only, the layout of a group of buildings may allow the infill of a small area up to a natural boundary, for example, an established tree belt or other landscaping feature or physical feature such as a boundary wall or road. 5. Any new dwelling shall include provision for private amenity space at a comparable scale to existing properties within the building group. Any new dwelling or its private amenity space shall not unacceptably affect the size or use of the amenity space of any neighbouring dwelling houses. And 6. The location, siting and design of the new houses shall meet existing rural design policy and guidance as set out in policy GBRA 1 and in supporting planning guidance. Generally, the design, appearance and materials of the proposed houses shall be complementary to the character of the existing building group, unless it is shown that there is no distinct design character within it. And finally, policy GBRA 9, consolidation of existing building groups, which states that within the green belt and rural area, proposals for new houses within existing building groups will be supported where all of the following criteria can be met. 1. The scale and siting of new developments shall reflect and respect the scale, character, cohesiveness, spacing and amenity of the existing group and the individual houses within the group. Any new building shall be located within a reasonable distance of the existing properties within the building group. 2. The proposal shall not result in ribbon, linear development or the coalescence of the housing group with a nearby settlement or another housing group. 3. Development shall not significantly adversely affect the landscape character or setting of the area. In addition, it shall have regard to the landscape backdrop, topographical features and levels. Definable natural boundaries between the existing group and adjacent countryside shall be maintained. Natural boundaries shall generally take precedence over man-made boundaries when defining the extent of a building group. 4. Private amenity space shall be provided to any dwelling at a comparable scale to existing properties within the building group. Any new dwelling or private amenity space afforded to it shall not unacceptably prejudice the size or use of the amenity space afforded to an existing dwelling house. And finally, 5. The location, siting and design of the new houses shall meet existing rural design policy and guidance as set out in policy GBRA 1 and in supporting planning guidance. Generally, the design, massing, scale, appearance and materials of the proposed houses shall be complementary to the character of the existing building group unless it is shown that there is no distinct design character within it. And finally, Chair, the review body should note that the applicant considers a site visit and a hearing as being beneficial to the review body. Thank you.
Thank you, James. The next point for the PLRB is to consider and decide how to proceed with this review. The applicant has indicated that a site inspection and hearing would be of assistance to this review body. As the review has been requested because of the failure to give a decision on the application, no report of handling is available for the application. Comment from the planning officer has been sought in advance of the meeting and are set out in Appendix 5 of the papers. The applicant's further comments on these are set out within Appendix 6 of the papers. And taking account of what is in our papers here today, we have to decide if they do in fact contain sufficient information for us to determine the review, or if we need more written information, a hearing or a site visit. I think personally that all the information that we have, plus the detailed photographs in the pack, this does provide us with all we need to consider this review without either a site visit or hearing or further written submissions. Has anyone got any comments? Do the members therefore agree that we can proceed without a site visit, hearing or additional information? Agreed? We can then proceed to review. I'll just summarise the points. The application is for planning permission in principle for the erection of two detached dwelling houses at land 70 metres south east of Ivy Cottage, Heads Highway in Glassford. The adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2 identifies the site as being within the designated green belt. If we consider that there is no valid policy justification to support the proposed dwelling house at this location and it would not accord with policies 4, GBRA 8 and GBRA 9 of the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2, permission can be refused as set out within the Planning Officer's Statement of Observations within Appendix 5 of the papers. Or, if we consider that there is adequate justification in terms of policies 4, GBRA 8 and GBRA 9 of the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2, for the location of the proposed dwelling houses, we could grant planning permission in principle subject to conditions. Our options here today are approve or refuse the application. Can invite any comments, decisions, reasons? Councillor David McLaughlin.
Thanks, Chair. Quite an unusual one this morning. I've never dealt with this before, so and just so that I'm clear on what James had read out at the beginning, the application hasn't been determined, but he did say something. I think he said something along the lines that it is likely to get refused, or it would be refused. Can I get some clarification on that? And if that was the case, why would that be the case?
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. James or Monica, would you like to just answer that?
Just to clarify, no decision had been made on the application, but the original planning officer had stated to the applicants that it was unlikely that he could support the application, and therefore it was his intention to refuse the application. And subject to hearing that, the local review was lodged for the failure to give a decision in an appropriate time. So that's why no further work could be done by the planning office, and it has to therefore come before the local review body.
Can I come back in, Chair?
Certainly, Councillor.
So, James, because of the advice to the applicant that's likely to get refused, I think that was the word used, does the making this appeal, does that circumvent any processes that the planning officials may have had or may have gone through and actually come up with a recommendation or a refusal?
Monica?
Through you, Chair. Yes, it's as you may remember, Councillor, there are certain timescales within which applicants can seek a review. So if the application is not determined within 2 months, then the applicant has the option of just simply taking it to the review procedure rather than waiting for the final determination of the planning officer. In this case, given the planning officer had given an indication of what his determination was going to be, because this was a delegated decision, then the applicant just simply took the view that it was better to seek a review, and that's very much in their gift to do that. And then the planning officer is removed from the process, and it becomes a decision of the review today.
Thank you, Monica. If you'll indulge, Chair, just one more very quick question. So, is it the case then, Monica, that cases can often take more than 2 months, but the applicant has got the right to make an appeal after 2 months has passed without a decision being made?
Through you, Chair, yes, the councillor, the application can take longer than 2 months. There are situations where the applicant can come to an agreement with the officer and they'll agree an extended timescale for determination. But in this case, the applicant took the view that perhaps wouldn't benefit them, and therefore lodged the application for review.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just before we move on to further questions, I believe Councillor Salamati has some IT issues this morning. Councillor Salamati, welcome to the meeting, and I hope you can hear us now. As this is a quasi-judicial meeting, unfortunately you cannot vote, but you can ask questions at the same time. Unfortunately, I can't take your vote as you missed part of the meeting this morning. I'll ask Councillor Norman Ray, if you just press your mic again, please, Councillor. There's a wee bit of technical issues this morning.
Hi. I was just interested in what your thoughts were regarding a point raised by the applicant in their response relating to 3 planning permissions that had apparently been granted across the road from the site in question, and suggesting that if it's 2 separate sort of distinct settlements, that those, should they be built, would then link those and create one single settlement. Pretty interesting comments on that question. Thanks.
James, are you happy to answer as much as you can for that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. To clarify, there are four new dwelling houses that have been granted to the south of the site and one across the road. Now, they were granted using a different planning policy because they actually had development already on site in the terms of steading developments that were then demolished to allow the new houses to be built because they didn't take any more footprint. In terms of the actual, what that now leaves for the settlement and whether it would fall within any specific GAP site, I'm afraid I couldn't advise any further because that would be a matter for the local review body to decide. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Allison, there is a bit of a technical issue this morning. I see you did pop up on screen. If you are looking to come in to speak, if you can press your speak again button, it will allow you to come in.
Oh,
Thank you,
Glenn,
Councillor Allison.
okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's along the same lines as Councillor Ray. It seems to be the position that it's either two separate developments here and therefore it's being refused because is it covalescent? Is that the right word? Or it's one area and it's a GAP site. The point the previous councillor made about the house across the road, permission would have made this a single site anyway, as he was asking. But even before that, this area of land is a farm storage area, and that is the only thing between what the planners have marked in the blue circles as separate residential areas. So surely they're actually joined already, and it's one, and this is a GAP site, and therefore all the criteria for GRB 8 and 9 are met. Is that not the case?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm unsure if James will be able to answer that particular point. James?
Thank you, Chair, but I'm afraid that it wouldn't be for me to advise on the interpretation of whether it is a GAP site or not, I'm afraid.
Thank you. If there's no further comments, I would like to move that we approve this application.
Can I?
I'll second it.
Sorry, Councillor Allison, I have just moved this paper.
Yeah, fine.
We approve
And I'll second it, Chair.
Any other comments? I am going to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes to allow the circulation
Clarify the grounds.
Yeah, sorry, we'll just clarify the grounds. The grounds are that we believe that this is a GAP site and therefore we are moving to approve this application. And they're going to adjourn for 5 minutes to allow the circulation of the conditions that will be attached to this planning application. If we just adjourn for 5 minutes, that will come through on email to all members. To allow you just to look at that, and if we can approve that, that will be the end of today's meeting. Thank you. If we can meet back here at 11 a.m. Thank you, and welcome back. Are we all in agreement with the draft conditions that has been placed? Everybody agree? Agree.
Agreed.
No hands raised. I'll carry on. Therefore, the decision of the PLRB is to grant planning permission in principle subject to the conditions. The next stage is that a written decision notice will be issued by the PLRB, and this should be issued within 28 days. The meeting is now closed. Thank you. Can I ask the clerk just to stop the recording?